Hello, this is Brett Lonsdale, and Sandy, you're back from wherever you went.
Yes, I didn't actually go anywhere, but I'm back. Yeah, yeah. Had a little staycation with kids, so that was really nice.
Yeah, I thought last week I wouldn't chat to myself or anything, so we'll just skip a week.
You
And so
normally
here
do
we are.
anyway.
True.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Probably won't get any laughs that one, but anyway. So um, what are we talking about this week?
Well, we thought we'd talk about some questions that come up pretty frequently from customers or potential customers, especially wondering about, we have these apps that aggregate data and that have forums that people are contributing content to and permissions management, and where does all that data get stored? Is it on our server somewhere or in our tenant or what? And the answer to all of those is basically no. It doesn't, it's all theirs. But we thought we'd get into a little bit more detail on each of the products and how that actually works functionally. And so where all that data actually is stored.
Yeah, fantastic question actually, because it does come up all the while, and Microsoft are also making moves to actually make this an easier thing to answer as an ISV as well, through the ability to actually get Microsoft 365 certification for your apps that are appearing in the App Store, or at least a publisher attestation, so that all of these questions are answered. But yeah, there's obviously quite a lot of organizations that are big enterprise organizations or even
Mhm.
medium organizations or government organizations
It depends on
that,
the space they're in, I think, a lot of times.
yeah, exactly, that they have concerns about their data, obviously, and this is, who has access to this data, does it meet the GDPR requirements, is it secure, and that type of thing. And usually these are in the form of questionnaires that are really sort of 50 to 100 questions long. And one of the challenges is that we fall into a category of software as a service.
Mm,
And the people that are perhaps in the procurement departments for a lot of these organizations will get the sort of best fit questionnaire for whatever they're buying. So obviously there's different questions about other things that they may buy from other vendors and so on. So we're falling into this category of, okay, they're a software provider. Yeah, they sell the software on a subscription, so therefore
mm.
it's a software as a service company. Here's a questionnaire that they've got to fill out, and unless they fill this out, then we're not going forwards with it. So we get these questions and there's no uniformity from one customer to
Mm.
the next, and unfortunately, yeah, it's a challenge that most of the questions are not valid. Now some are,
Right. Or
but
not applicable to
yeah,
us. Mm,
yeah, sorry, not not applicable to our type of software.
mm,
And I thought it'd be a good topic to actually try to explain why it's not applicable. So if we take some examples of service providers, software as a service provider, you've got companies like Salesforce or HubSpot,
mhm,
Microsoft, or
mhm,
whoever,
mm,
where you effectively are you're not running any form of server or anything like that, but your um, co-workers or whoever are keying information in that's obviously private information. So part of that we do, we have a CRM tool. It's an online CRM tool. We actually use HubSpot, and part of HubSpot, of course, is you keying in there contact names and addresses of people,
mm.
and also details of conversations and so on. So if you're HubSpot, this is a very applicable to you because obviously we would have a concern and we would have a duty to our customers as well to ensure that the software that we're
Right.
using is meeting these standards. Otherwise, we would not store their data
Right.
in that cloud. Um, so yeah, that's very, very applicable to that type of software where that information is leaving our environment, is going into their environment, they're processing it and storing it. And we need to also make sure that they don't share that information with other people as well. So these are all valid questions to ask them, and obviously they're a target for security issues because there's
Mhm.
so much information in there.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have a duty of care, obviously, to our customers, this data that goes in there, and that's somewhat the questions that are applicable
Mhm.
to these security questionnaires. But what's not applicable is the software itself, because our software isn't like HubSpot, isn't like Salesforce. Our software is a tool, it's an add-in or an app that sits inside of the Microsoft tenant. So really, the data that's being processed, the data that's being stored, is not by Lightning Tools, it's by Microsoft.
Right.
So yeah, these conversations need to happen there, not with us in as far as our app and what it's doing. So
Mhm.
to give some examples about that, there's lots of questions about our authentication. How what type of authentication do we provide? Do we provide multi-factor authentication and so on? And what are the security protocols around all of that? It's all irrelevant because the only authentication that is occurring is with Microsoft 365. So you're authenticating with them, not with Lightning Tools.
Right.
So you've already done that authentication with SharePoint or with Teams through that environment in order to gain access to the data.
Mhm.
Now the data actually um, does not leave that tenant. It's stored inside your tenant, and it will depend on what app we're talking about as to where that data is stored as well. So I thought actually what would be useful is to actually talk about those apps
Oh,
and where
sure.
the data is stored.
Mhm.
So I mean, we could start off with Lightning Forms. I think this is a real key one
Mhm.
because there's some vendors that claim that they are the only vendor that doesn't store or process data outside of the tenant, and that's not true. There's
Mhm.
loads of
Right.
them that do that. So yeah, we've got the best coffee in the world. It's one of those ones. I'm sure there's a million people that say that. Um, and actually, in England, I don't think we're allowed to say something that's not true.
Oh.
so,
Oh.
so we wouldn't be able to make that claim. You know, we could say it's one of the best coffees in the
Yeah,
world.
sure.
But we couldn't say it was the best unless it actually was. So, so yeah, Lightning Forms. Actually, this is a tool that takes a SharePoint list form. So in a SharePoint list, you have your new form, your edit form, and your display form, and you can
That are
customize
built into SharePoint.
that are built into SharePoint. Yeah, absolutely. And what happens when you fill out one of those forms is the data gets collected into the list, and that's going into the content database that Microsoft is hosting for you. And yeah, that's it. So if we customize one of the forms, all we're doing is changing the layout, or we're allowing you to change the layout
Right.
using the tool. And you can set, conditional formatting and colors and things like that. You can create further calculations and so on. But this is actually all turning into just, JavaScript that's loaded on the page and CSS and things like that. But it's still in your tenant. It's not taking that data out of your list and processing it at Lightning Tools or anything like that and then putting it back. It's all there. It's happening on the browser page.
Right. And the configuration itself, because I think I've seen some tools where, you're keeping your data, but the configuration kind of goes out to a browser to do that. And then that, I think the configuration is stored elsewhere. But in Lightning Forms, the configuration you set is also stored in your site, and you have access to that if you want to, but yeah, it never ever comes anywhere near us.
No, absolutely
We
not.
don't mind
And
what you do.
exactly. And I think the only time that, we might get involved in that type of conversation is if it was through a support query and, we were trying to troubleshoot the issue and we said, well, could we have a look at the
Mm.
configuration file or something
Right,
like
right,
that?
right,
But that would take you to actually send it to us. We can't
right.
access it unless we do that. And again, even if you were, we wouldn't be able to see the data. We wouldn't be able to
Mhm.
process any
Right,
data or
right,
anything like that.
right.
We'd be reading some CSS. It might have, the only personal thing might be the color code that you used or something like
Mhm,
that
mm.
on that form. So yeah, that's Lightning Forms and how that works. So yeah, absolutely nothing processed or stored outside of the not just the tenant, but even the site.
Right,
So it
right,
does leave the site that you're in. And of course, that site is protected by the Microsoft 365 authentication and also permissions.
right,
So yeah, it's as secure as you want to make it.
right. Yep.
But and then the Another one is, I think, a useful one to talk about is DeliverPoint, because this is a question that comes up there quite a bit. And I think DeliverPoint is fairly unique. I'm not going to claim that we're the only one, because maybe we're not, but DeliverPoint is the permissions management and permissions reporting tool. So yeah, how this is working is it's allowing us to report about who's got permissions to your site, or who's got permissions to a group of sites, or to a list, or where is permission inheritance broken, and that type of thing. And then we can copy, transfer, delete permissions, and that sort of thing. So yeah, actually with DeliverPoint, there just is no data, full stop. Right. So it is real-time reports, at least in the client-side web part version for SharePoint Online. So real-time reports, if you click onto discover permissions, it's going to go and inquire as to who's got permissions, but that again is working in your page and it's displaying it on the page. It's not storing it anywhere. So there is no data storage with DeliverPoint. Did you want to add anything to that? Just because
well, I just wanted to mention, yeah, we have coming soon in DeliverPoint is going to be the ability to store report templates, and those too will still be in your site. And if you export a report and store that as a CSV, that's also in your site, in a SharePoint document library. So yeah, all of that is always staying in your tenant.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so yeah, there's nothing more to add against that one, I don't think. Yeah. In fact, it came up with a recent customer. The question was, obviously with DeliverPoint, it's very powerful in the fact that you could delete a lot of people's permissions or grant yourself permissions or something. And you can't actually do anything with DeliverPoint that you wouldn't be able to do normally, because everything is security trimmed. And with the SharePoint framework model, you cannot elevate privileges to somebody else. You can't say, yeah, run this bit of code as the tenant admin or anything like that. It just doesn't work with SPFX. So the only thing, it's winning there is time, because if you wanted to, you could, of course, as a user with full control to a bunch of different site collections, if you were a site collection admin, of course you could go and visit every single document and delete the permissions for a particular user or whatever if you wanted to do something harmful. But it's going to take you a while, because you got to do that on every single document individually and every site individually and so on. With DeliverPoint, you can actually just say, within the scope of this site collection or within the scope of these site collections, delete this person's permissions. But it effectively is going to do that same manual process. It's just doing it for you in batch, and only if you're allowed to do it on those files or folders. So yeah, there wouldn't be any sort of hacking risk or anything like that, unless you'd left the door open on your tenant. That's where that would be your responsibility. So.
Right. Yeah, if the wrong people are site collection admins.
Yeah, which could take place anyway.
Yeah, right.
So go on, you talk. Lightning Conductor.
Oh, okay. I was going to go social squared, but
go social squared then.
because I would say that's another one that comes up pretty frequently, because there is a lot of content, and I think people are used to kind of online forums where obviously the content is on some website somewhere and that's stored there. But in the case of social squared for SharePoint Online, that content is all stored in SharePoint lists and within the site where you're using the social squared forum. And again, none of that ever comes to Lightning Tools at all. So all the content, all of the configurations of the forums, the different forum groups and names and so on is all stored in data in that site. So nothing that goes outside of your site again, and it's all based on SharePoint permissions again too, whether people can see the posts or participate in the forums. And so yeah, it just depends on how you have your SharePoint set up.
Yeah, exactly right. And it does go back to permissions as well, because one of the things you can do with social squared is take the a set of forums from one site or from one team and display them in another team or another site, but you still need to have permissions to the original content. Otherwise it's just not going to display for you. So yeah, there are challenges. Well, not challenges, that's a good thing. You have security set there.
Right. So yeah, it's up to customers to make sure that they have their sites permissioned in the way that they really need them to be to allow people to use things the way they need to use them.
Yep, yep. And in a lot of respects, this is more secure than what you had in SharePoint on premises,
Mhm,
because Social Squared in SharePoint on premises did actually have an SQL database,
mhm,
and that's also a secure environment. You've got multiple different security options. So you could use single sign-on with that database, and or trusted authentication and things like that, depending on what security or protocol you used. So whether you're using NTLM or Kerberos. So yeah, you could use Windows authentication if you wanted to. So that token would be there. But also you could use mixed mode, and that's
mhm.
where that would be an oversight on your behalf. But maybe it doesn't matter because you're not internet facing or whatever. But yeah, the mixed mode would put that username and password in the connection string, which obviously wasn't a good idea. So we'd always recommend that people use single sign-on or something like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
But that just doesn't even come into the
Right,
equation anymore. It's
right.
SharePoint list driven.
Yeah.
You're protected by Microsoft 365 authentication and site permissions
Mhm.
as you were before. So
Yep. SharePoint
um,
Online is so much easier in many ways.
it is absolutely right. And even if you opened your site up to external users, those external users, they're going to have maybe the ability to read those posts and create content. But that's where you need to be careful about who you're sharing the site with and so on. And that's where DeliverPoint comes in. It gives you that type of report, so you can actually
Right.
see who the very very easily see who you shared that
Mm,
site with.
mhm.
So good one on Social Squared and Lightning Conductor.
Right. And so there too, yeah, it's all security trimmed, and it's only just displaying your data. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it, is to aggregate data, aggregate content, which is your content. And it's Lightning Conductor is simply a web part on a page or on a Teams tab, and not taking the data and copying it to anywhere or putting it anywhere, but just displaying the data as it sits in your SharePoint. And again, security trimmed. So that's again up to you to set the permissions right on each of the sites and lists and libraries that you're aggregating. But then an individual person will only see the things that they have access to based on permissions that you set up in SharePoint.
Yeah,
And yeah, and
not
the
much more to add
configuration,
than
yeah, the configurations as well, again, are stored in your tenant. And in the case of Lightning Conductor, we do fairly frequently ask for the configuration file to help us troubleshoot and support if that's needed. But it's up to you if if you want to send it.
and again, you're only seeing the configuration, so you'd
Right,
see,
right,
yeah.
exactly. We would
So
see URLs, for example. So sometimes some people like to obfuscate that. But the main thing that usually we're after when we're looking at configurations is what kind of filters you have set and what kind of which options you've chosen. That's easier for us to see in one glance in the configuration file than like run through all the screens and make sure we didn't miss anything.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So and of course, that's where we, as soon as that is shared with us, our GDPR
Right, exactly.
processes do kick in, because
Hmm.
obviously you have shared something with us.
Hmm.
We make sure that the HubSpot is secure and
Hmm.
that sort of thing, which is actually part of our ticketing system and so on. And we do have guidelines to adhere to make sure that we don't store that data
Hmm.
unnecessarily and what have you. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely right. And yeah, I think perhaps the last one to talk about here is the data viewer.
Hmm.
So it's got the word data in there. What's
But
up,
also
Jeff?
the word viewer. So it's just viewing.
So yeah, the data viewer. It's a product that allows you to display data in a grid, and you can also display that in a chart as well. There's different types of charts. A couple of new ones actually. You got the tree map chart and the gauges now as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can connect that to SharePoint lists. So they are your SharePoint lists inside your tenant, and security trimmed again, so you can only see the information that you would already have access to. You can also connect it to Excel files, but they have to be in your tenant. They have to be in a document library somewhere securely set with permissions. You've also got business connectivity services as an option as well. So this is where Actually, in SharePoint Online, you don't have that luxury of connecting to on-premises data sources, but you could connect to data through a web service or OData or something like that. And that is down to you to make sure that that's a secure channel. But, that data doesn't get stored or processed by Lightning tools. It's your service providing your data, and you can display it inside the data viewer. So that service would need to be set securely. There's tons of guidance on how to do that online. And what am I missing there?
You can also connect directly to OData, for example, not just through
Yeah,
BCS.
exactly. Yeah, so that would be the other one, or using web part connections. So you can connect multiple web parts together and surface that inside the data viewer. So that allows things like display your results in the Lightning Conductor, and then maybe build a chart on those results that you're aggregating and that type of thing. So,
but it's all just happening on your browser and your tenant.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so no storage, no sharing. It's just displaying that data as you have it configured. So, yeah, I think that's worth mentioning. And we are going through the Microsoft App Store because we don't want to be the only vendor that doesn't have the publisher attestation label against our apps. But yeah, a lot of the questions are really yes or no. There isn't a not applicable option. So it's a real difficult one to answer. It's
you don't really want to say no, and it sounds like you're not secure somehow, but yet.
Yeah, do we have a bunch of security guards outside our offices looking after your data? No. We actually don't, because we don't have any of your data.
Right, exactly.
We can't say that. So yeah, that's the challenge. The data is in Microsoft, which I think will be under the sea somewhere.
Yeah, right. Can we put a link to this Lightning Tools chat in our attestation?
I think that's great. Absolutely right. So yeah, I think that's all there is to say, really. There's the Lightning Tools products. This is what we want to do, and we don't want to get into the realms of processing or storing your data. I wouldn't want to have that headache or that responsibility either.
Exactly.
So, and it does maybe bring up the question of GCC high as well, because a lot of our customers are looking at that, and I think you raised a couple of things about license key activations and so on, which is I think one of the only times that our app reach out. Updates to the CDN. Exactly. So these are the only reasons why the app has any sort of connection to anything, but the CDN it's hosted in a secure tenant as well. And then
and it's only receiving data, it's not sending anything back.
Yes, it's not your data. It's not doing any processing. It's the JavaScript files. It's our styling and all sort of stuff for our app.
I should say that the customer is receiving data, not sending.
And then the license key activation. Yeah, it's literally like this is the license key. It's licensed to this tenant, and we're just creating an algorithm to apply that and giving you the thumbs up. You can use the product.
Right, but we do have a dedicated version of each of our tools for SharePoint Online that lets you, if you are in a tenant or industry where you don't want even that CDN update access, or you can't have that, then we have a version that actually uploads all of those files into your tenant so that you do have them, and there's no accessing of the CDN to do anything. That just does require then when we have an update that you have to update it manually in your tenant, like download it from our website and upload it into your tenant again, because we are not able to push out hot fixes or something like that. But for a lot of people, that's a good solution, like in the GCC high tenants.
100%, absolutely. Excellent. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground there. So
hopefully that was helpful to everybody.
Yes, absolutely, and hope that was a good chat. So thank you for that. And I guess so next week we'll be talking about the Lightning Conductor, and we'll be able to show you one of the new features there, which is using the Microsoft 365 group queries. So it's a great way to go and aggregate your content.
Hmm. Yep. We're going to be having a webinar later this week, so I'll put a link in the description for this chat. If you still, there'll still be time to sign up for the webinar if you want to see those new Lightning Conductor features.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Sandy.
All
See you
right.
next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.